Hello, I'm Ben Lucas and this tutorial is for Tuts Plus. Today, I'm going to show you how to create a Valentine's inspired image using a hot cup of hot chocolate. Now, here's the finished image right out of camera that we're going to be working on today. First, let me show you how we got there. Here is the setup, just for reference. I'll come back to this image and explain everything in a second. I wanted to show this to you so you can have it in your mind when I'm explaining the lighting setup. Here's the first image we took with just the softbox on in the back. This is our key light. It's really important when you want food photography, drink photography, or getting that soft romantic type look, kind of a moodier image, to do back or side lighting. So I put the softbox behind it. And notice how I didn't put the softbox aiming directly at the cup. I actually kind of have it off to the side. What that does is that gives us less harshness here and kind of lets the light wrap around just a little bit more and create more of a gradient. Now, there are several problems with this image. We're losing a lot of detail here and it's a floating cup. There is no background elements. Let's fix that. We added in the extra reflectors that it doesn't overpower, so it is still backlit, but we're getting that detail on the front side of the cup that we wouldn't have gotten otherwise. If you look right here, there is a line. I'm going to talk about how to get rid of that when we look at the full setup as well. I just want you to see that. Now this image, this is just our background light. So this is adding a little bit more context to the scene. This is going to ground our coffee cup in reality and not make it look like a studio setup. The line that you saw there is a reflection that was caused from the white plate it's sitting on and the dark table. This piece of paper here, when moved underneath there, gets rid of the light to dark contrast and it gets rid of that line for our finished image. See how it's very subtle here. This light here, I have a speed light on a stand shooting through a diffuser, which kind of creates a soft box. This gives me kind of a little bit of uplighting, creates a nice diffused light that just gives a hint and doesn't overpower the softbox back here. Here's another speed light on a book. If I didn't put it on the book and put it directly on the table, there would be a hotspot right here. It wouldn't really evenly illuminate the back. This little white piece of tape is a DIY impromptu flag that I put on there, so it wouldn't expose any of the cup, as you see in this picture. See how this exposure is leaking? This was before I did the flag, and once I did the flag, it was just aiming on the background. Now, this piece of paper right here is blocking this whole setup so it doesn't leave a reflection on our cup. In the back here, you can see we've got our kettle, so that way we can get some hot water, as well as a plate and tongs. What we did to add extra steam, the boiling water just isn't enough. So if you soak some cotton balls and then microwave them, the cotton ball will hold steam for a couple minutes. Granted, if you're doing several shots, you're gonna have to refresh this. The tongs are because it is very hot, steaming water that you're holding, so you don't want to hold it with your hands, but you do need precise placement. We needed to spread out the cotton balls wide enough that you're getting full coverage of the cup so it looks like all of it steaming, but we also need to compact it just enough that you're not going to see any of it poking out from behind. Otherwise that's going to be a pain and we're going to have to Photoshop that out, and we want to avoid that if at all possible. Here's the final image I chose that we got straight out of camera. It's pretty flat. We're going to add contrast in Photoshop, but there are several problems here that I want to point out before we go. It's important to kind of get an itinerary of what you're going to be doing so you don't end up over photoshopping your photo. First, there's covering up all the imperfections, such as dirt, scratches, or crumbs. Secondly, there's the dark spot right here. This chocolate adds something really nice to this Valentine's inspired image, so we really want to be able to see it here, and we're losing some of that detail. Next, we got a nice full head of steam with a combination of the boiling water and the cotton balls hidden behind the cup. What we're going to do is we're going to craft some of this steam into a heart to really complete the Valentine's inspired image. So let's move over to Photoshop. So here's our image in Photoshop. What we want to do is we want to get some of the cleaning done. What I usually do is I create a new layer and call it clean. Then I'll do any clone stamp tool work or spot healing brush work that I need to do on the image. Depending on where you are in the photo, one will be better than the other. Here's an area where you want to use the spot healing brush over the clone stamp tool. If I were to use the clone stamp tool, sample an area, and then cover it up, if you zoom in, what you notice is I'm actually repeating part of the pattern, light, dark, light, dark. Grab the spot healing brush, make it slightly bigger than your crumb, and there you go. It evens out the light and dark values on either side of it. Here's an area where using the clone stamp tool is better than using the spot healing brush. If we use the spot healing brush, the problem is you have blurry up here and sharp down here, and it's going to try and put those two together, and you end up with something that looks like a mess. So let's undo that and go over to our clone stamp tool. By selecting right next to it, you get the same gradation of light and dark values, as well as the same blurry or sharpness value. There's a little bit of a repeating pattern, so for the next one I want to sample from over here, but what you can do to get rid of that repeating pattern is turn the flow down on your brush, choose one of these other values that are over here so they're the same sharpness versus blurriness but different light dark values, and then just lightly painting in. Okay, I skipped forward and went ahead and cleaned up the image for you. Here's before, here's after. One thing to remember is whenever you have a crumb, for instance, this guy here, if you can't see that, it's a little blurry, but that right there. One of the things you have to remember when clone stamping or removing distractions is that this cup is reflective. So not only do you have to get rid of the crumb, you have to get rid of where it reflects, right there and right there. Okay, now we have a clean image. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a curves adjustment right here, and we're going to make this the color that we want it to be with about the contrast that we're going to have in the final image. It's going to be a very small, slight adjustment, but it's going to add a lot more color and kind of create a moodier image. I like that right there. There's before and after. Let's add a new levels adjustment, and we can just bring that up just like that until you see a nice bit of detail in that chocolate right there. Now, we don't want to brighten the whole image, so hit Control-I, Command-I on a Mac to invert your layer mask. Make sure you're painting in white here, and we can just paint in that levels adjustment right there. Now, don't worry about getting too precise. First of all, not a lot of people will notice. Secondly, if you do make a mistake, you can always change your brush to black and paint it back in. This is an area where you can go back and forth using your X key, painting in black and white until you get just the amount you want. If you think it's too strong, you can lower the flow right there and just build up the parts until you have it looking how you want it in the proper areas. I think that looks good right there. There's before and after. If you think it's a little too strong, just grab the opacity on that layer. You can slide it all the way down and just bump it up till it looks good. Or you can leave it at the top and bring it down till it looks good. I think that looks great. Now, let's add another levels adjustment right there. What we're going to do is we're going to bring up the emphasis on this smoke in the parts where we want emphasis. I'm going to just bring up this slider until it's kind of hitting the low points on the edge here, which is right about there. And for the mid slider here, if you bring this up too far, you're just brightening everything and you're losing all the darkness, and we do want to have a good bit of contrast. So I'm going to bring that right about there. Again, we don't want it to affect the whole image, so Control-I just blacks out your layer mask, and we can just paint in like so. And we're back. Here's the layer mask. There was a very bright white piece of steam right there that I didn't want, so I made sure that I'm not going to affect that because it ruins the shape I'm going to try and create. There's before, there's after. When you're looking at smoke shapes and trying to put shapes into smoke, think of it like an ink blot test. Find what you're trying to do, in this case a heart. Find an area of your image that you think will work well. In our case, that would be right about here. So what I'm doing is I'm using the smoke to enhance that area, and we're going to create a heart. So here's before and here's after on the smoke enhancing layer. This kind of brought up that weak part of smoke I picked to look like the rest of it. So what you can do is hit Control J to just boost up that layer. Now it doesn't look perfect, but on your second layer you can finesse the mask even more using your brush. Just remember to paint in black anywhere you don't want it to be showing up extra, which would be this super bright spot and anywhere here in the middle. So now here's no power, half power, and full power. The effect is starting to come onto its own. Now for a heart, there's going to be two parts to it. There's going to be the outside shape here, as well as the inside shape, kind of help defining that. We're going to do that in two separate parts. I'm going to create a new merged copy of all the work we've been doing. You can do Control, Alt, Shift, E, or on a Mac, Command, Shift, Option, E, to create a new merged layer with all the levels adjustments we've been working on. We're going to open up Liquify, but before we do that, let's make a selection around the area. Making a selection isn't necessary, but what it does is it opens Liquify with a smaller area, so that way it takes less of a toll on your computer. Now, if you're using the newest Creative Cloud version of Photoshop and your Liquify panel opened up and looked like this, it looks like there's not a lot you can do here. Don't worry, old Photoshop is still here. They just moved it under this button, Advanced Mode. Make sure you click that and you have all the options Liquify has to offer you. First thing we want to do is use the Freeze tool, which is right here. You can also find it by clicking F. By hitting your end bracket key, you can make your brush size bigger, and we're going to freeze the parts that we don't want to liquefy. Kind of making a broad selection around the heart just to protect those parts of the table that we don't want moved. Now, we can take our big move tool and just kind of slowly and subtly make small nudges and changes to this until we get a more perfect heart shape that we would like. Remember, when you're working on this, we're only concerned with the outside of the heart. We don't have to worry about the inside part just yet. There's before, there's after. As you can tell, it's a lot of subtle changes that all built up to create a now looking heart. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to work on the inside of this. So let's hit Control J, that's Command J, Control click the thumbnail to be able to select it again so we can use the Liquify tool with a lot less computer toll. Now, we don't care about the outside, so if the outside gets blown out of proportion, that's just fine. All I'm looking at is this black teardrop here in the middle. So I'm going to just kind of pull on this until we get the heart shape that we're looking for. That looks okay, but this point in the center didn't really come to a point. So let's use the pinch tool. Use your bracket keys to make your brush bigger or smaller. And let's just kind of pinch on that point until you can see a more defined point, just about like that. And then we can use the Liquify brush just to even out these side spaces so it doesn't look too fake. Now I know what you're thinking, that looks terrible as a whole, but remember, the only part we're worried about is this black oval on the inside. Hit OK, let's take a look. Add a layer mask, take the brush tool and a decently low flow or opacity, and we can paint in that teardrop shape that we had before. When you're painting in white, just paint in that teardrop. What we're doing now is we're not really adding all of that ugliness that the Liquify tool created. We're really just adding in the black parts on the middle that we liked. And I like how that looks. So our original looked like that. Now it looks like that, which looks a lot more natural. Let's add some more emphasis. Add another levels adjustment, and let's just bring it up just like that. What we're going to do to make this one different than all the other ones is we're going to use the blend if option, which you can find on this button under blending options. Now, blending options, I'm going to look down here in the blend if. I'm going to tell it if the underlying layer is black, I don't want it to affect that part. See how now it's only lightening selectively, but it's giving us a very harsh contrast. If you alt click or option click on a Mac on one of these sliders, then you can pull out and selectively adjust how much of that you want. I'm just looking for shape. So I really want just kind of these inside parts where you can see lines and shapes and strong contrast. I think that looks good, so let's hit OK. So now, before and after. As you can tell, we're leaving the dark parts dark and brighten up the light parts. If you don't like how strong it is, you can always bring it down. And again, a layer mask here is completely necessary. So here we are. We'll add another levels adjustment. This time, we're going to darken it quite a bit. I'm going to pull the black slider up just a smidge, and then we're going to pull our midtones down until we're getting some nice contrast here in the steam. Using a nice big soft brush, we're just going to paint in just like that, lower the flow, and go over this until you get an effect that you like. Here we are, just a couple finishing touches. I'm going to add a curves layer because we're just going to do some more selective darkening. I want this image to be a little moodier, a little darker, and we're going to selectively add this to the cup. Change the blend mode of this to luminosity so it doesn't affect the colors too much. Make the layer mask on that black, and then again with the low flow, we can just paint in those parts that we want. So it darkened it just enough that it creates a little bit more mood and romance to the image. One last step and we're ready to go. I'm going to add yet another levels adjustment, but this one I'm going to leave the RGB channel alone. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through these channels and see what we can do to create a cool image. This one is not going to be for contrast or brightening or darkening. This is actually going to be for color. In the red channel, I'm going to go down to this output level and just bring this up a little bit. And what that does is it's going to create a lot of reds in all of your deep shadow areas. On the greens, I'm going to come up here and bring down, and that's going to add magenta, which is the opposite of green, to my highlight areas. And I'm going to do likewise in blue until I just get a nice warm looking image. There we go. This layer, before and after, just adds a hint of red orange warmth that really gives it that Valentine's feel. Now I've gone through and cleaned up all the masks, leaving just a little bit of gray so it's not perfect black, making it look more real, and gotten all the smoke elements exactly how I want them. I created a new merged copy of our heart area. I'm going to liquify that the same way we did before. Really, the tip here is if you want something to look perfect, it's probably not going to happen on the first layer. If you want it to look great and natural, then it may take a few tries, a few layers, and blending those layers together until you really get something. Let's make a duplicate of that, Control J, and right click, free transform, right click, flip horizontal, and I'm going to lower the opacity so we can see what we have, and I'm going to line it up. Feel free to give it a tilt so that way it actually matches what you had before, because I like one half the heart better than the other one. Gonna give it a small distortion so that way it actually lines up with all of the points. Add a layer mask, get out your brush, and slowly start painting in. Let's see what we get. When cleaning up the mask, you don't want to leave it perfectly symmetrical. You want to leave a little bit of the organic elements in there. Looking at our finished layers, here they all are. You can see we used a lot of very simple tools to get a very cool, very complicated looking effect. It's all about slowly building and adding and selectively choosing what you're going to adjust. There we have it, a finished, beautiful, romantic Valentine's Day image. I'm Ben Lucas, and thanks for watching.